In the first hours of September 17th, I woke to the sound of artillery. Our positions were being shelled.
The guerrilla commander-in-chief Yasser Arafat has rejected a peace agreement and ceasefire announced earlier today by King Hussein and acknowledged by the Arab leaders' peace mission.
For 22 years, 2.5 million Palestinians have been neglected, have been treated as non-citizens of this world. We don't have an identity.
Were many people killed here?
40 people.
In this area?
In this door, in this house.
We are not against Jews. I want to make this point very, very clear. We are against Zionism. We are against the establishment of a Zionist, racial, aggressive state in our country. We were living with the Jews in Palestine and in all the Arab world peacefully, very peacefully. And we can live peacefully as equal citizens.
On September 27, 1970, Nasser brokered the ceasefire agreement, which was signed by Arafat and King Hussein. The following day, Nasser died, leaving the Palestinians without their benefactor. The agreement collapsed, and in July 1971, King Hussein continued his attack.
Today, the commanders were obviously expecting trouble, and they ordered people off the streets and told the shopkeepers to close down.
Travel document.
At a basement briefing in the hotel, the passengers seemed remarkably cheerful, as the Red Cross briefed them on the stage of negotiations between the commandos and themselves.
The United States is sending another helicopter carrier, 1,500 Marines, and other ships to the eastern Mediterranean to join the 6th Fleet already there. The officially stated reason is that this is a precaution in case they are needed to evacuate the hijacked hostages still held in Jordan. As for the possibility of American military intervention in Jordan, which is now in the midst of a civil war, the White House says, quote, no decision has been made one way or the other. It also said these forces are concerned with the safety of the American hostages, and their safety depended to some extent on the stability of the government in Jordan.
For the 127 women and children who've already been released by the PFLP, the final hours before the ultimatum expired were spent head down as government forces and Palestinian commandos fought it out in the immediate aftermath of yet another unsuccessful peace agreement. Also in the hotel with the released passengers were the International Red Cross team who'd flown in here in an attempt to secure permission for them to leave the country and also to win the release of their husbands and fathers who are still on the 2 jets out in the city.
Let's pin the date, then follow what makes it possible. We're in Amman, mid-September 1970, and you can feel the air change fast. I'm not here to narrate your emotions, I'm here to trace the mechanism, what gets said, what gets signed, what becomes operational, and who ends up living inside the consequences. That line matters. It flags that this isn't just politics versus militants. Humanitarian reality is already in the room, because civilians are already in the blast radius. Then hijackings raise the temperature. A pause isn't peace, it's time to choose. Then comes the decision room.
Today, because of the fighting in the capital, all communications being cut with the revolution airstrip.
In the past 2 days, there has been practically no direct communication between Jordan and the outside world, but a message came through yesterday from Jordan's amateur radio station JY1, addressed to ham operator Mary Critter of Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. The sender was King Hussein himself. Amid the static, he apologized for not writing to Mrs. Critter, but said he would when he gets his house back in order.
Until recently, his problem has been to restrain them from a possibly disastrous confrontation with the Palestine guerrillas. But with the appointment of a military government and the establishment of martial law, it seems he has been forced to go back on this policy of compromise. After months of squabbling among themselves, the Palestinians are united against him.
Here's the chain, calmly, no drama, just responsibility. A civilian cabinet is removed, a military cabinet is installed, and governance starts behaving like an operation. Once it's on paper, it moves very quickly. Martial law is in a mood, it's a legal lever. Civil life becomes command life. Listen to how it's framed. Order, disorder, iron fist. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about that. I just want you to remember it, because it keeps coming back.
About this experience?
Well, it was a rather frightening experience, but we were well treated. It's very warm and uncomfortable, but that was not due to any mistreatment or mishandling. And it was a long night.
This is where reality becomes contested, and when that happens, civilians get treated like the evidence, and then like the excuse. Now pin the camps, because this is where language starts doing work.
The guerrillas' main central positions are in the refugee camps, which are on the perimeter of the city, and also down in the center, the very center of the city, the commercial area, around the Roman amphitheater, where they had some of their main political offices. On the first day, the army moved in, began to open up on all these houses in here with heavy 50 caliber machine gun fire, the kind of thing that you're hearing right now.
That word positions is doing something. Refugee camps are neighbourhoods, families, clinics, schools. When camps get treated like positions, civilians get pulled into the line of fire. In practice, this is how control happens. You don't just fight people, you control movement. And movement becomes dangerous. No water run, no hospital run, no safe exit.
The ruined lives of the Palestinian refugees. Amman is the capital of Hussein's Hashemite kingdom, and there are 600,000 people in Amman, but 400,000 of these are Palestinian, and most live in the misery of the camps, and half have been born and bred in the misery of these camps. 20 and 30 people jammed into each concrete block hut, or tin shack, or tent. These are people who get their can of water each day at the camp tap. These are people who live with the stench of urine from the open sewers. A people who live in poverty with neither passports nor peace nor promise of peace, but only despair and the pride that comes out of anger.
So this is the switch. A decision room becomes a decree becomes a schedule. Next we follow the paperwork, because paperwork is how violence becomes routine.
On 2 occasions in the last 6 months, Jordan's been brought to the verge of civil war as guerrilla troops and units of the Jordanian army have clashed in the streets of Amman.
That was the switch. Now comes the toolkit. Martial law turns exceptions into routine. In practice, wider powers, faster orders, fewer protections. And when a government says iron fist, it's not poetry, it's a policy preview.
And I have said this to many of you ever since the beginning of this year. This is going to be a very, very critical and difficult year. For the following reasons. Israel has always struck whenever she began to feel that there was at least a defensive posture that might prevent her from achieving any further of her plans. This is the phase we are going through at this stage. Israel doesn't seem interested in peace, an honorable and just peace. In the face of that, our army must be in a position to fight. For it to be able to carry out its duty, it has got to be happy in terms of what is behind it. The support of all the people, the love of all the people, the respect that is due this army.
Next comes the move that turns political factions into lawful targets. A public ultimatum. Disarm, evacuate, comply, or the state treats you as an armed rebellion. And whatever you think about armed factions, this doesn't land on factions only. It lands on cities, neighbourhoods, camps, and families. Because enforcement doesn't come with perfect aim, it comes with mass methods. Then the curfew logic arrives, and it's harsh in practice. Curfew isn't just stay inside. It's no food runs, no medicine runs, no safe passage, no ambulance certainty. It turns daily life into a risk calculation. That sentence is the mechanism. The state creates a rule, then can treat breaking it as a justification for lethal force, even when people are breaking it to survive.
The feeling that my home and my family is safe. And in these two areas, wedges were driven. I am firmly convinced that what has happened is not an accident. And as I have said, my position during these last few days has been that of a person walking in a minefield.
I believe there is a new initiative and there is a new movement. After the situation was left to deteriorate to a very dangerous point in terms of dangers to all concerned in the area and dangers to world peace.
Did you get to Amman? Yes, Amman.
You got to Amman?
Yes.
And what are things like there?
I don't know things, but...
you gave the food to the people?
Yes, the people.
Have you brought back any wounded or not?
No.
You weren't allowed to?
What?
Did they let you bring any wounded people?
No.
The army didn't.
Did you saw many wounded people? Yes.
Many on the streets or where?
Yes, in the street.
How many?
For many of them, Jordan had nothing to offer but the squalor and the misery of the refugee camps. 6 new camps were added to the 4 left over from the earlier Arab-Israeli war. In them live the 40% of refugees that the tottering Jordanian economy cannot absorb.
Black September battle, which some call Black September. I might call it White September because it was a conflict between the regime and the state. Yes, between authority and chaos, not between the Fedayeen and the state, nor between the Palestinians and the Jordanians. This was a flawed logic at the time.
Under martial law, the state doesn't only control streets, it controls information, because controlling the story is part of controlling the population. This is how security becomes expansive reach: body, home, press, and memory. After the hijackings, order suddenly has a louder audience. So this isn't the battle yet, it's the switchboard. Martial law doesn't fire bullets, it makes force feel legal. It turns a country into a controlled space, and then the ground phase begins. On paper, it's security measures. In real life, it's curfews, checkpoints, silence on radios, and families trying to move inside a closed, controlled city. Now we follow the paperwork into the streets.
I remember trying to get a bit of sleep that night. I said my prayers. By early morning, the city was starting to stir. In the first hours of September 17th, I woke to the sound of artillery. Our positions were being shelled. The first thing we did was go to Arafat's office at the Joint Command Center. Arafat was there. Most of the Fatah leadership was there, and even Habash. They were on the phone and the radio with Damascus, updating them on what was happening and openly urging the Syrians to intervene.
Finally, the risks of foreign intervention in Jordan. First of all, if you will, on a map, the situation on the ground. First of all, in Amman. In Amman, fighting is still ongoing. The Palestinians have pockets of resistance. And again, last night there were violent clashes, artillery fire, mortar fire. In the north of the country, see the shaded areas near Ramtha, Jarash and San. Clearly these are bases that the Palestinians hold and hold firmly, supported by elements of the Syrian army. Since yesterday, the Jordanian army has launched offensives against these Palestinian bases, symbolized on this map by arrows. However, and this is the new development, it seems that these offensives have yielded some results and that the Jordanians have inflicted severe losses on the Palestinians and the Syrians. In any case, this morning, no problem. The Palestinians still hold these regions and the fighting is very intense. According to the latest news, it was even reported that the Jordanian Air Force had begun bombing Irbid. And then another new development, but this time concerning the south of the country. While it was believed that the south of the country was entirely controlled by the Jordanians, journalists traveling in southern Jordan towards Saudi Arabia, and thus the Gulf of Aqaba, were stopped and checked by Palestinian commandos. It therefore seems that the Palestinians have also infiltrated and set up resistance posts in the south of the country. Hello, since last night there has been fighting in Jordan. It's a war between King Hussein's forces and the Palestinians. Fighting is happening all over the country, in Karak, Amman, Zarqa and Irbid. It even seems that the Iraqi troops stationed in Jordan may have intervened in the conflict on the side of the Palestinians. But for now this news is not confirmed. What we do know is that the Palestinians have requested Iraqi intervention and that the Iraqi government has supposedly ordered these troops to intervene, although it is unclear if they have actually joined the fighting.
Let's note what we're hearing. A meeting, a promise of control, then cars with machine guns at the city edge. This is the moment it flips from politics to street logic.
We're once again surrounded by very heavy fighting here at the hotel. The 50 caliber machine guns and mortar position just to the north of us. Battle began in the northeast of Amman on Thursday morning. The central earthy positions up around the stadium. The army then moved down into the city where the guerrillas had taken up positions during the night. The guerrillas' main central positions are in the refugee camps, which are on the perimeter of the city, and also down in the center, the very center of the city, the commercial area, around the Roman amphitheater where they had some of their main political offices. On the first day, the army moved in, began to open up on all these houses in here with heavy 50 caliber machine gun fire, the kind of thing that you're hearing right now.
This is why capitals are dangerous when they become battlefields. The map isn't abstract. It's homes, hospitals, and people trying to get to both.
Okay, one last question. What is your wish now that you are back in your country?
The first and last wish is to offer our country whatever service we can and to do everything possible for the liberation of our besieged homeland. Yes, exactly, that's it. I hope that all Arab people fulfill their duty in liberating the occupied land from all Arab countries.
Watch what this does. Once movement becomes illegal, everything becomes treatable as a target. Even getting water, even getting help.
Last night the machine gunning continued under flares, and we're hardly getting any sleep at all. The firepower is simply incessant. The silence is abnormal now, and I've noticed that none of us are flinching very much when the big rockets go off and the big mortars go off. It's the silence that seems strange, and the silence that seems dangerous because we don't know what's going to happen when the silence comes.
King Hussein appeared briefly before cameras yesterday, the first we've seen of him since the fighting started 6 days ago. He said his forces had given Syrian forces invading North Jordan a bloody nose. He said that his officers believed that in Amman they were fighting not only guerrillas, but the regular soldiers of Arab countries who'd infiltrated the capital from neighboring states. In reference to the tank attack from Syria, he said, "We had not expected an attack from an Arab country. We were hit from the back, but we have stopped this and we're hitting back." With the situation in Jordan apparently going his way today, King Hussein was back at the radio set in his summer palace, getting in touch again with his radio ham friends all over the world. And here's how he spoke to Laurie Margulis of Ilford, telling him that the situation was much better and that everything tonight was quiet.
Maybe something better in every way in respect to developed, yes. It's been very much better than anything that has been ever in the past.
The record is clear on the pattern. Ceasefire language rises after the shooting starts, not before. And it doesn't automatically reach the street.
The guerrilla commander-in-chief Yasser Arafat has rejected a peace agreement and ceasefire announced earlier today by King Hussein and acknowledged by the Arab leaders' peace mission which went to Amman from...
You've just come out of Amman. Could you tell me what it's been like the last week?
Very, very noisy.
You've been in Amman itself?
Yes, on Jebel Amman.
In your house?
At first in our house, later we moved to some friends.
Why? Was it firing?
Yes, we lived right behind the Queen Mother's palace, and there was a lot of firing
Your
there.
house damaged?
Slightly, only a few bullets through the windows, no more.
This is the part that gets erased when people call it restoring order. Order doesn't bleed, people do.
But first, the headlines on today's fighting. King Hussein has claimed that his forces in the north have given the Syrians a bloody nose, and the towns of Erbid and Ramta are said to be in royalist hands. His commander-in-chief, Field Marshal Majali, says that the Syrians have retreated in disorder back into Syria, and his forces now hold the vital crossroads south of Ramta, the key to the guerrilla supply route to Amman.
It seems that these offensives have yielded some results, and that the Jordanians have inflicted severe losses on the Palestinians and the Syrians. In any case, this morning, no problem, the Palestinians still hold these regions and the fighting is very intense. Latest reports even indicate that the Jordanian Air Force has begun bombing Erbid. And then another new development, but this time concerning the south of the country.
and information reached us from intelligence and from the radar system that the Syrians were massing tanks on the Syrian-Jordanian border. We were exchanging views about the Syrian attack, especially with our Soviet friends at the time. And whenever the issue was put to the Soviet ambassador, his reply was, "These are units from the Palestinian army and Palestinian tanks, and they are not Syrians."
If you're watching this from the outside in 1970, this is what you get. Maps, statements, and fragments. And inside the city, people live inside the gaps between those fragments.
You're the head of the Wife of the Chancery. What sort of time have you had?
Well, our house was hit by water, so we've been living with the ambassador in his house, which is opposite ours. And we've been, like everybody else, crouching in the cellars, wondering why they've been firing all the way around all the time for the past week.
She concluded by sending a conciliation mission to Amman, a conciliation mission whose purpose is unclear given the current state of affairs. However, this morning, King Hussein announced the release of 4 Palestinian leaders who were arrested a few days ago. And King Hussein said, "I have reached an agreement with these 4 leaders that should allow for a ceasefire." But it is clear that this agreement, made with these arrested leaders and which fully satisfies King Hussein's positions, is practically unacceptable to the other Palestinian leaders. And as of this morning, the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian command announced, "We will continue the struggle and we will see it through to the end."
Yes.
Bullets?
Yes, bullet.
Yeah, where it comes through here?
Yes, come here.
And one smashed the wall?
Yes, broke the wall and this come on about the babies.
The babies in the room?
Babies was here in the room and they carry us and cry and go to from here.
The babies, were they killed?
Yes, not killed.
Not killed?
Not killed.
Were many people killed here?
40 people.
In this area?
In this door, in this house.
Why were the army shelling here? Were there Fedayeen here?
The army want to destroy the revolution.
Yeah, no Fedayeen hiding here, were they?
Come here, they enter the house.
Fedayeen?
Yes.
And so the army shelled the house?
Yes, shelled the house.
Yeah.
Tiny wording shift, big effect. Positions, sounds like a front line. But this is a city. So the question becomes, where do civilians sit on a map like that?
The team is 149 strong, but so far they've only got 40 patients. The Americans next door have about twice that number, and there are also German and French medical teams in other hospitals. One reason suggested for the slowness in getting casualties to come forward is that the guerrillas have refused to take their wounded to a government hospital. But the British doctor in charge, Lieutenant Colonel Muir Goodall, says he's not concerned where his patients come from.
The casualties we've got here, as you probably know, we were rather late in arriving. And so the casualties we're getting are mainly old injuries from a surgical point of view, i.e. they're not seen within a few hours of wounding, which is basically the function of this hospital.
Just to make it perfectly clear, combatants is not a synonym for Palestinians, and it's not a synonym for Jordanians either. Most people in the frame are just stuck.
The casualties we've got here, as you probably know, we were rather late in arriving. And so the casualties we're getting are mainly old injuries from a surgical point of view, i.e. they're not seen within a few hours of wounding, which is basically the function of this hospital. But we're seeing them perhaps 2, 3, 4, 5 days after wounding.
What does this in fact mean in medical terms?
It increases the surgical problem insofar as one is not dealing with a potentially infected wound, which is the purpose really of this surgical team.
Just, what's the name of the hospital, doctor? Because the internet has gone out.
Al-Falastini Hospital. Yes, and then one of the doctors was killed, so they named it Dr. Abdul Wahab Al-Karni Hospital. But its name is Shujai Palestine Hospital.
I didn't agree because I got a telegram
through the ICRC telling me that the Red Crescent, Palestinian Red Crescent, is authorized by the Jordan authorities to work as for their humanitarian job in Irbid, Jerash and Zarqa. And this convoy can reach Irbid, Jerash and Zarqa, but not Amman. And then I asked the Palestinian Red Crescent to go to Zarqa and wait there, and to myself, Doctor.
The reporting here describes wounded people trapped between sides and hospitals becoming political territory. We can be precise about what's visible. When movement is controlled, medicine becomes a negotiation.
I am anti-demand on the ICRC side. On the and on the Palestinian side, 3 doctors. It was decided to go only to have some discussion in Amman. But in Zarqa, everybody wanted to go to Amman, and it was not possible for me to bring them to Amman. And I asked them to give back the ICRC flag. It was too much dangerous to go to Amman when curfew was on with all those people. I was really terribly anxious about this. And they refused to give back the Red Cross flags.
That's not a side note, that's the system. Help isn't just about supplies, it's about permission.
I took one, and this gesture of my side of was very bad interpreted by them, and they was very angry against me, and they came, everybody trying to push me, and so, but they gave back all the Red Cross flags and they went on their side. As to me, I waited the moment, and when everybody was away, Dr. Oyen and myself, we went to Amman. Not the day before, yes.
The guerrillas claim the army hasn't kept its part of the Cairo bargain. They say it's searching houses for guerrillas, arresting suspects, and refusing to free captured guerrillas. And they accuse the army of trying to liquidate them by police methods where they failed by force.
A Red Cross is meant to be a sentence everyone agrees to. Here, it's treated like background noise.
But it is clear that this agreement, concluded with its arrested leaders and which fully satisfies King Hussein's positions, is practically unacceptable for the other Palestinian leaders. This morning, the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian command, announced, "We continue the struggle and we will pursue it to the end." It seems that the announcement by King Hussein of the release of the 4 arrested Palestinian leaders and the announcement of this agreement was actually a psychological warfare maneuver that will yield no concrete results.
Right, and here's the pivot. Agreements can pause the shooting. They don't dismantle the machinery. Most of the time, they just change the labels on it. So this is the street. What it looks like when order becomes a controlled space. What follows is pressure, wording, rules, and the way the record gets narrowed until violence sounds administrative. Once you've seen what the paperwork does in the streets, the next question is, who gets to call it order, and what that wording can make disappear.
Like someone recovering from a dreadful accident, the people of Amman are making their first faint signs of normal behavior. Uncollected rubbish is being burned in the streets, and a general cleaning up operation started. So far from expressing satisfaction that peace is now settled on this battered city, some guerrilla leaders say that there's a distinct possibility of another clash. Sandy Gall, ITN, Amman. No ambulances can get through, and the situation is reported to be disastrous, especially for civilians.
It seems to be some violence here. No, there is no violence at all. Please, look at this man. Please, no. Is he one of the occupants? No, there is no occupation. I can assure you that. There is no occupation at all.
Let's keep it simple. 3 pressures at once. Domestic, curfew, detention, censorship. regional, mediation, summits, shifting alliances, and international, deterrence and diplomacy. And every time we hear a clean phrase like law and order, we pin it to what civilians were living through that same week.
So, when I arrived at Ashrafia Hospital to receive this convoy, I found complete confusion because the people who had been turned away did not want to leave. So they had the BBC with them, the BBC were there, and a BBC representative came up to me in quite an aggressive way saying, what's this all about? You're with the Red Cross. These people came with the Palestinian Red Crescent to help the victims here, and the Jordanian authorities are showing them the door.
That there are around 500 people. Mostly children, women, and civilians. Wounded, that is. Wounded. And the dead people are around 150. Mostly civilians.
Pay attention to the wording. End sabotage, withdrawal, restore order. On paper it sounds like a reset.
In that city, the population of which is around 120,000. There is no water now. The water was cut by the authorities. There is no electricity, and food seems to be getting short.
In practice, it builds containment, zones you can police, movement you can criminalise, and punishments you can file under administration. That's the first civilian reality of managed conflict. You're stuck inside the event, but not inside the explanation. A ceasefire isn't a switch, it's a word that can exist while artillery still fires. This is the part that people forget. Relief isn't only supplies, relief is permission, and permission can be delayed, denied, or staged, while civilians pay the clock.
I was surprised to be summoned to the palace in a convoy of army vehicles, and I realized that there was a military government in place.
I was summoned on the 14th of September 1970.
Two truths can coexist. Armed groups exist, and civilians live where the fighting happens. If we blur those, we recreate the logic that justifies collective punishment. So we stay strict. What's visible here is urban war turning routes, services, and hospitals into contested terrain. This is the knife edge. Stop bloodshed is the moral frame. Liquidate the resistance is the power frame. What matters isn't which sounds nicer, it's what each frame authorizes on the ground.
It means acting under a martial law, not civilian law, so you can occupy, kill, imprison, and so on.
We acceded and responded to the call of the kings and heads of state and the call of President Nasser to stop the bloodshed. Despite the fact that the heads of state, or most of them, as well as the late president, knew that it was only a temporary truce.
One way the record reads is this: images of calm while control stays switched on. And when the talk tries to pivot to the external enemy, watch what gets omitted. The immediate reality of civilians bearing the consequences of decisions they didn't make.
Through the streets of what was once Philadelphia, today's Amman, the Fedayeen patrol together with the army and the police.
Because this system, the system of order, only wants to liquidate the Palestinian resistance, not only the Palestinian resistance, but the Palestinian people.
The calming of public opinion, which Hussein's soldiers hope these mixed patrols will achieve, often turns in the city center into applause for the Fedayeen riding along, who present themselves as military police with red armbands. The mixed patrols show lesser reconciliation between the two camps than the king's powerlessness. If army and guerrillas, Jordanians and Palestinians, keep order together, then the Hashemite throne, which always tried to avoid that, now represents only itself.
Inside, the intruders had sent off telex messages accusing the Jordanians of mass murder and attacking world news media for spreading lies.
Yes.
Where is Israel, sir?
The Israel question is always there. I mean, always.
I mean, the other Arabs leave everything.
Even when we hold a demonstration, they tell us, well, what is Israel doing? I mean, it's always held over us.
Once labels harden, 3 things get easier. Treat a whole community as suspect, justify mass controls, and rewrite civilian life as security terrain. That's how a civil conflict gets processed as an administration.
But at the same time, the prevailing public awareness as opinion was that society had split into 2 labels. One label, East Jordanian, East Banker origin, and one label, Jordanian of Palestinian origin. So when September ended, the general perception was that both sides wanted bloodshed, and that Jordan had to be without the resistance. Jordan must be without the resistance, and the resistance must leave.
Now, people will always claim secret masterminds. Sometimes the record supports parts of that, sometimes it doesn't. So our rule is simple. Here's what we can prove, here's what we can't, and we don't build castles on fog.
The conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean that every Fedayeen who clashed with an army checkpoint, or every soldier who clashed with a checkpoint, was aware of it.
Now we've seen how language and pressure works. The question isn't who won the street, it's what machinery got built while the street was burning, and whether it's ever switched off. Next comes the verdict, what changed, and what didn't.
There's a difference between the society as a whole and certain power structures and interests within these countries.
By July 1971, the shooting can stop while the machinery keeps running. So next is the verdict, what changed and what didn't. Violence can pause, the system can keep running.
I think this is final or majestic. I think it is final.
Listen to the framing, not events, a sourcing system. Policy becomes order, chaos becomes the enemy. That language doesn't just describe what happened, it makes what happens next easier to justify.
The second day of the fighting.
This sounds administrative, but it changes the physics of daily life. Routines become permissions, movement becomes conditional. Meetings, donations, even basic errands shift from normal to allowed. And once life is permission-based, enforcement can stay invisible, right up until it lands on you. That's the lived shape of order.
Most of them leave at night after the 6 o'clock curfew has started, and this makes the blow slightly softer. The Jordanian government has no objection to them leaving at night. It says it doesn't wish to humiliate the guerrillas. It's happy as long as they go.
Curfew doesn't just stop fighters. It locks families in. Food, medicine, visits, escape routes. And the suffering happens in the gaps between the permissions.
In the struggle, which was forced upon us all in this country, there has not been a victor and a victim. The victor has been and will always be a clear-cut policy.
Yes, the Jordanian government issued a statement, an 11 or 12-point statement, demanding that before negotiating with us, the Fedayeen had to comply with it. They called them points, meaning stop breaking the law and comply with the law. Yes, no, if you want to hold a meeting, you have to get permission now, given how things have become. I mean, it feels like a country again.
Your country is back.
Yes, if you want to collect donations, it's forbidden unless you get permission. These days are security days. Anyone collecting donations needs permission. Before, we used to collect donations without permission. Second, carrying weapons is forbidden. Carrying weapons...
Inside the cities.
Inside the cities.
Inside the cities, not in the territories.
But for every guerrilla who leaves, 2 or 3 so-called armed militia stay behind. No one knows how many. And they're the joker in the pack.
When the hot phase cools down, conflict doesn't disappear, it reorganizes. Instead of open fighting, you get pipelines. Capture, screening, release, expulsion, detention. And we keep the razor sharp here. Targeting armed groups is not the same thing as labeling civilians. That conflation is part of the machine, and we don't replicate it. And here's the quietest mechanism. If you control what can be printed, you control what counts as what happened. And if the record narrows, accountability narrows with it. That's not media drama, that's a policy tool. Shut outlets, reject editors, blacklist dissent, and the public only receives one authorized version. So families who lost people don't just lose safety, they lose legibility. Their story becomes unconfirmed, then controversial, and then gone. Now zoom out just enough to see the pressure field, still inside the 1970 to 1971 record. Publicly, leaders condemn. Privately, the records show little tangible action. And that gap, scolding on TV, acquiescence behind doors, is part of how crackdowns survive.
They announced the curfew would be lifted for 2 hours, because a curfew had been imposed. So during the 2-hour lift, we tried to leave the house and move to another place, but as soon as we went out, the army was all around us, meaning they arrested us. At first, they took us to a military camp in Tababur, then to the intelligence headquarters. I mean, we went through some simple questioning, that's all.
Questioning or torture?
No, not at all. On the contrary, they treated us well, especially...
But this activity is developing, yes, it's just developing very slowly, because once again, we don't have the ability to impose the ICRC on governments in this area.
Do governments accept your work in this field easily?
Of course, since there's no legal basis, it becomes a matter of persuading governments of the need to act in favor of political detainees. So the reaction, the attitude of governments varies. Some even request our intervention on certain occasions.
He draws the line the world keeps trying to blur. Not a faith versus a people, but a political project and its consequences. And he ties it back to the coldest fact of all, statelessness, being erased on paper.
On September 27, 1970, Nasser brokered the ceasefire agreement, which was signed by Arafat and King Hussein. The following day, Nasser died, leaving the Palestinians without their benefactor.
We are not against Jews. I want to make this point very, very clear. We are against Zionism. We are against the establishment of a Zionist, racial, aggressive state in our country. We were living with the Jews in Palestine and in all the Arab world peacefully, very peacefully. And we can live peacefully as equal citizens.
For 22 years, 2.5 million Palestinians have been neglected, have been treated as non-citizens of this world. We don't have an identity. I don't have...
Arafat and Hussein signed a further agreement regulating the presence of Palestinian fighters in Jordan. But some Palestinians refused to accept the deal. The agreement collapsed, and in July 1971, King Hussein continued his attack.
And the victim, if there is to be a victim, And we are talking in terms of the past. For what has happened can never happen again. Is of necessity chaos and anarchy.
So here's the verdict. What's changed? Open fighting winds down, the guns go quiet. What's unchanged? The blueprint. Movement control, aid choke points, custody pipelines, narrative narrowing. That's how a war becomes a system. And this is why this isn't just an epilogue. Mechanisms can outlast armies. Once a state learns it can manage a population through permissions, access control, classification, and story control, those tools don't stay in 1 year. They reappear wherever power is seeking compliance without accountability. What unfolds after 1971? We'll park that for the next episode, but the blueprint, we can already see it, right here, inside the Jordan record.
So what we're left with isn't just a clash of events, it's a record of language, of decisions, of systems, and of how those systems shaped who could move, who could speak, and who would carry the cost. In the next episode, we follow what this set in motion and what the aftermath made possible. Everything used in this investigation is linked below. Documents, transcripts, archival references where available. And a practical note, some archival material relating to Palestine and the surrounding events has become harder to access, restricted, or removed, even from major collections. So if you know of reliable archives, footage, or sources I should be looking at, share them in the comments. Restoring the record is collaborative. And widen the lens beyond this channel. Palestinian journalists and researchers, and Palestine-related coverage more broadly, have faced documented removals and visibility limits across platforms. So if you believe careful, civilian-centered reporting matters, don't just watch it, help it travel. Share it, save it, send it to one person. If this episode added clarity, please like the video. It genuinely helps Prottayon reach people. And subscribe if you want more investigations built this way. And I'd really value your thoughts on this. Looking at what we pinned in this episode, what sustains power longer? Force, or the language that makes force feel justified? Stay curious, keep questioning, and most of all, take care.